Parquet Courts have been doing this music shit for over 10 years now. They are a New York rock band, a post-punk band as well, a punk band even. They cross over many different genres in the world, the subcategories of rock music really. Light Up Gold is technically their second album. They didn't really get much buzz for their first album, but this was the album that seemed to catapult them into a wider audience, and you can see why, to be honest. This album, even 10 years later, I think has held up incredibly well, and even for the 2012 release, I think it's just a very obviously fun, give no fucks rock album. They are a very different band these days though. I mean, I don't necessarily think their albums exuberate this same kind of energy that we get from the 2012 release here, but they have managed to widen the net really, especially with the audience that they've got now. But the kind of songs that they make, they certainly know how to put out a really catchy, anthemic punk track that often actually seems to have quite a political edge to it, particularly on their album Wide Awake. They had a lot to say on that album. And the lo-fi aesthetic seems to have gone away as well. I'm wondering if that's just because they probably have a bigger budget and better resources to work with these days, as opposed to their early days on this album where it really just does sound like they recorded it in a basement somewhere or something like that. You know how indie bands be. They're out here recording in fucking abandoned factories, and they're like, hey guys, we recorded this in an abandoned factory. Listen to our album, stream it on Bandcamp. But no, even as very indie as this album is, it is really good. It's rough around the edges, and for very good reasons. It makes for a really fun, frenetic album, I think. The first track, Master of My Craft, is just so melodically pleasing. They just know how to craft a really good guitar melody on almost every track. They're so memorable. They have the garage rock aesthetic down to a T, so it feels like the track is pummeling, but at the same time, it's incredibly memorable and catchy. The track Borrowed Time is a track that the previous track goes into perfectly. They are so succinctly, tightly knit, these two tracks. They complement one another so damn well. And the melody on this track, once again, is so bloody jolly. It's a jolly old tune, this one. Love it on the few times on the track as well, where it stops and then it kicks back in, and it's like, yeah, I love that about this track. I love it when songs do that so successfully. It's so fun. The chorus is so sing-along as well. Seems these days I'm captain in this borrowed time. Do, 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 do. And there's so many tracks like this on the album as well. They're just so fun in that way. You're No Stoner is a track that just locks you in with the guitar groove. They are so good at locking you in with so many of their guitar melodies. It's fantastic. You've got some really short and snappy to the point tracks, which I guess could be longer, but there's not really any issue with them being so short because they're pretty much doing exactly what you want them to do. They don't necessarily need to be much longer either. Careers in Combat, for example, is so short and snappy. It's touching like the 1 minute mark really. Disney PT as well. It's very feisty and full of life, but it's very quickly moving on to the next thing. And again, don't necessarily mind that because there doesn't need to be, you know, a 4-minute track of this kind of music. They play to their strengths. They know what their strengths are. Light of Gold as well is just a track that has some really great chanting. They did this more on the album Wide Awake, where, you know, the vocalists would kind of just come together and, you know, syncopate and chant the same line. The backing vocals as well, things like that. They always managed to find a way to do this even better later on, but they've got it locked in even early as their 2012 album too. It helps that there's just such a memorability to the way the vocalist sings. No Ideas, for example, there's that kind of like deadpan delivery that I think really works. The track is very gritty and DIY, particularly on the chorus. The music kind of clatters together in a bit of an ugly way, but I like that, again, that it just does sound so you know, DIY. It's very much that. Went to a shrink, he found my brain, and No Ideas is what he found. This is the kinds of sarcastic lyrical ideas that these guys bring to the table. It's always entertaining. Tears Aplenty as well. That really stone-faced deadpan delivery I think really works. It's good how they can kind of like switch it up. and not always do that vocal delivery, but then when they do, it works as well. I think that's a really good quality to have in this kind of band, because obviously not all of their lyrics are super serious, but when they bring it to this kind of like humorous level, it works too. Stoned and Starving as well, really repetitive track to be fair, but I think it's really memorable, and once again just really good. And I don't really have many negatives to say about this album. It's 30 minutes, 30-ish minutes. It's so short and straight to the point. Every track gets you grooving in a different kind of way. It's just such a good rock album. You can't fault it. For a rock album, I think this is really the peak in the 2010s, to be honest. Not like the best of the best, but peak for rock music. I mean, if you want a really good, succinct, straight to the point rock album in the 2010s, this is exactly what you want to go for. This is a really good band, and all of their albums really are worth your time. Even if I think their most recent one is probably their weakest to date, I'd still say you should check it out. But certainly 10 years later, this album, Light Up Gold, is still a really good album. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments if you think it's still good. If you don't think it's good, would love to see what you guys think. Thank you for watching as always. Subscribe if you have not already, and goodbye.